Welcome back to YourTown television program, where we're featuring highlights of the Naval Postgraduate School. I'm your host, Jeff Kline, and I will be discussing several different aspects of the Naval Postgraduate School, but one of them is our outstanding faculty. And in our faculty segment, we'd like to feature leading faculty that are not just researchers and educators, but are also nationally known. And to begin that show, we'd like to introduce Dr. Gerald Brown from our Operations Research Department, distinguished professor. He is a member of the National Academy of Engineering, won numerous awards in professional societies. So, Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, let's see. Distinguished professor, member of the National Academy of Engineering, holder of 2 patents for optimization programming, are all impressive. But let's begin to talk about where you came from and learn a little bit more about you. So, how did you come to the Monterey area, and where were you raised?
Well, I was raised all over the place and went to high school in Italy. I was a military dependent, so I've had many, many states in my background. Fortunately, in Italy, I had a great high school, Vicenza American High School, and that was a big leg up for me. And I was in Monterey because the Navy sent me here. I came here in uniform as a freshly minted U.S. Navy ensign, and by the time my tour of duty was over and I departed, withdrew from the service, resigned, I was asked to stay on.
Oh, now I understand you were born in California, though.
I was born in Hollywood when they grew beans in Hollywood.
Oh, is that right? Well, they still had a film industry there. You're not that old, for crying out loud. Well, tell me, how did you join and why did you join the Navy?
Well, it was during the Vietnam War. You didn't have much choice. I had a student. I was a professor at Cal State College, Cal State University, Fullerton. I had a student come up from one of my classes who was a commander in the Navy and said, you know, you can go in the Army if you want, but if you can pass this IQ test, you can go in the Navy and do some fun things. So I took the IQ test, apparently didn't do too badly, and I ended up in that way in the Navy, starting as an enlisted man, and eventually I became a commissioned officer and served.
When they realized you had a PhD is when they sent you to Monterey?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, tell us a little bit about where you got your terminal degree, what it was in, and what did you research for your dissertation?
I studied mathematics at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. And my dissertation was on a very obscure topic, intentionally so, because a dissertation is a document that you want to finish. You don't want to become too hypnotized with it and spend too long with it. So it's a very, very obscure topic in statistical estimation and optimization.
Okay. Have you used it since?
No.
Oh. Well, in fact, tell us a little bit about that specialty, this operations research specialty. What is that? We had an earlier segment that we had the Admiral talk about it, but tell us a little bit your view, how it's applied both in the Navy and maybe nationwide.
Well, I'm proud of Admiral Rout was one of my students in 1974. The operations research is about making things better, and we do things mathematically typically to abstract reality and to avoid making mistakes. So we characterize things such as in optimization. We characterize what are our courses of action, what limited resources do we have, what technology can we apply, and among the many, many, many alternate means that we can employ, which of those is the best means or the most attractive or the ones that will make our management or make the commander-in-chief the happiest.
So can you give us some specific examples?
Sure. We optimize the way that our ships in the Pacific and in the Persian Gulf and those areas of Indian Ocean, we optimize the way that our ships are supplied by supply ships that go to meet them in rendezvous at sea. It's a very, very complicated ballet, but millions of gallons of fuel are involved. And if we can reduce fuel, that increases our operational readiness and availability, and it saves the taxpayers a lot of money. So we do that. We do things in missile defense. We do things in operational planning. Basically, we're trying to provide our senior officers and policymakers with courses of action and let them choose, based on their expert judgment, which of these courses of action is the most desirable. But we guarantee them that the courses of action that they're evaluating are indeed very good, very, very wisely chosen.
So when you say you optimize fuel and ammunition delivery of ships in the Western Pacific, what does that mean as far as optimization goes? What do we save when we do that? What is actually created when we do that?
Well, when you double the speed of a ship,
yeah,
you more than triple its fuel consumption. So when you have to speed up a ship, that's usually a symptom that you've made a mistake in your scheduling and you're trying to recover from that mistake. So what we try to do is provide a forecast of the operations of these ships far enough ahead of time that we can steam efficiently at reasonable speeds and save fuel.
Fantastic. Well, Now, your academic and research career covers the time from when we had slide rules to punch cards to now supercomputers. What are the biggest impacts of the changes of that computing power to the practice of applied mathematics, operations research, and helping
Well,
decision makers?
this may surprise you, but the biggest impact has come from mathematics, not from computer hardware.
Ah,
The computers are much faster, but the advances that we've made in our capabilities to do the planning that we do is mostly derived from mathematical results. So it's a case in pure theory actually having real-world consequence for our citizens.
well, now I understand that you were directly involved in obtaining one of our first major supercomputers at the Naval Postgraduate School. Can you tell us that story?
Well, the backstory there is I did an optimization project for the Navy Supply Corps. This was after Vietnam, and we were redesigning the depot facilities in the United States, which were dated back to World War II, and basically we're downsizing by closing many facilities. And so I helped a Navy four-star admiral choose an optimal configuration for what's now the Defense Logistics Agency. And at the end of this project, he was quite grateful for the help he'd received, and he said, "Can I do you a favor?" And I said, "Yes, you can. Do you happen to have $5 million?" And he did, and so he bought us our first supercomputer.
Well, that's fantastic, and you were allowed to do research then on it, obviously. But,
Yes.
well, now I mentioned earlier that you held 2 patents. So first, tell me, how does a Navy civilian hold a patent, and then let's talk a little bit about what those are for.
Okay, well, as a Navy employee, as a civil servant, my name is on the patent, but the patent belongs to the Navy. And there are 2 motives to do this. Motive number 1 is the Navy can actually make money by charging license fees to corporations or other agencies that want to use these ideas. Idea number 2, or method number 2, is we would prefer not to have someone else sell the same idea back to the Navy. So these are defensive patents. One of them was for a simple problem. How do you decide how to get from one point in the ocean to another point in the ocean while avoiding obstacles? You would have thought that had been solved hundreds of years ago, but it turns out it had not been solved before. The other patent was for a method to save fuel underway, and it's a little too complicated to go in on the air here, but it does save a lot of fuel, and it's currently in use by Navy ships.
Well, tell us a little bit. You said it's a simple problem to go from one place to the other in the globe, and it is if I've got a chart and I've got my plotting tools. But you're talking about doing it mathematically, and so although I can state the problem simply, is the mathematics complex actually to solve that, given the fact we have Australia in the way at times?
Well, I went home one Friday evening thinking I'd knocked this problem off over the weekend, and 10 months later I had it solved. So yes, it's pretty complicated.
Now, is it unusual for faculty at the Naval Postgraduate School to have patents?
No, it's unusual in the mathematical disciplines. Mathematical patents are quite difficult to achieve, but we have some very clever people in the engineering side of the house that have patented a number of widgets and gadgets.
And I use that as a surrogate to just demonstrate the cutting edge capabilities that we have at NPS, both the talent with our faculty and the research programs they have. But let's shift a little bit about our students. So you have seen thousands of officers go through NPS over the last so many decades. Tell us about a few of those that you remember, or give first your general impression of our students, and then maybe highlight a few of the ones you remember.
Well, as you know, the 2 reasons we work here are our students and the mission. And we have a uniform day once a week, and where all the students have to wear their uniforms, and we wear a coat and tie as a matter of respect. And when you walk into a classroom and you read those medals on their chests, you realize, where do we find people like this? Where do we find people to make them do what they do and want to do it and do it so well? And the secret weapon is that these students come to us after having had some experience at sea or in a cockpit or in a submarine, and they know what's wrong with the Navy. They know what's wrong with the Department of Defense, and they sometimes have a real burning passion. Boy, do I hate having to do that. Let's fix that. And that gives us a ready input for working on topics that are of current interest and are useful. So the students are just marvelous, just fantastic.
Now, usually they're mid-career students, their place of duty is the classroom, so they're very unique graduate students in that case, is they're always in their seats and ready to learn. But do a few of them that have gone through the years and graduated stick in your mind?
Oh, of course. I mean, you've interviewed Admiral Ron Rout, the president of NPS. He was my student in 1974. Mike Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and ex-CNO, was my student back in the 70s. We've had a number of them go on. Tom White became Secretary of the Army and was one of the directors of Enron. By the way, the only one that wasn't indicted. He actually made money. So yes, there are a number of these folks that have gone on to very distinguished careers in public service, and it's gratifying to see them succeed.
Now, after they leave the postgraduate school, do they ever maintain contact with you?
Oh, sure, sure. Both our U.S. students and about a quarter of our students are internationals from allied countries, and it's also gratifying to have them keep in touch. They're doing quite well.
Do they just not personal information, but they also reach back for problems that they encounter or help?
Yes. In fact, when they graduate, we give them a money-back guarantee, and they frequently have a chuckle when they call back and say, "Okay, boss, I'm cashing in my money-back guarantee."
Now, you've also not just had students in classrooms, but you've also had them for thesis and worked on the research projects. Is there some of thesis that you might remember that is particularly applied, either changed the fleet in some way or was delivered to the fleet or made some great advancement that made you happy?
Yes, but they're classified.
Oh, well, that's true too. We didn't even discuss that, did we? We do hold different levels of classification and are able to do everything from top secret to unclassified work. Now, did any of the students get a chance to work on the patents that you're talking about?
No, those particular topics were motivated by problems that were brought to us by students, but it was a number of our faculty colleagues colluded together to do those patents. That was a little bit beyond what we would expect from master's students.
You are also a member of the National Academy of Engineering. That is quite prestigious, but tell us a little bit about why it is and what responsibilities you have as a member.
Sure. National Academy of Engineering is about 2,000 engineering professionals in the United States. They elect from their own body. It was created with the National Academy of Sciences and what's now called the National Academy of Medicine by President Lincoln during the Civil War in 1864. He wanted to gather together luminaries from both industry and from science to give him the best current advice on various technologies that were of great interest during the war. It's a nonprofit, private organization whose principal mission in life is to advise the government for the better of humankind, for the better of society. We all serve pro bono. We serve on a number of committees and commissions, and we write reports and do the sorts of analyses that happen to be in our particular domains of expertise. It is quite an honor, it's quite prestigious, but it's also a burden. When the phone rings and someone on the Academy is asking a question, or when someone calls from the Hill or someone calls from one of the departments in the government, you have to answer.
Absolutely.
You just can't say no.
So can you give us some examples of some of the studies or boards you may have participated in?
Well, I've served on a particular board that looked at bioterror, risks of bioterror. Now, much of that is classified. About 18 of us, drawn from many, many universities and from industry, wrote up a report which went to the president on the relative ways to assess the actual risk of various pathogens and how much damage they might cause. Served on the Air Force Studies Board looking at actually trying to characterize the psychology of leaders internationally so that you can guess when they're going to make decisions, such as Saddam Hussein.
Were you successful?
No.
Oh, okay.
But we succeeded in the sense of finding out what we don't know. It's important to characterize unknown unknowns as well as what you can know.
So when a call from Congress comes, for example, and I know that has happened to you before, those are the topic areas they ask you about, or can it be anything?
It can be anything, but of course you're careful. There are records kept by the academies, and they know what the domains of expertise are that they're most likely to get help from in your particular area. I'm not an electrical engineer, so they wouldn't call me about an electrical engineering problem.
And you're not the only National Academy of Engineering member that has been selected by, or been selected from MPS. Are there others?
There are two others, and remarkably, we're all in the same department, and all have offices next door to each.
Oh, you cheated off of each other, is that it?
It's like being struck by lightning multiple times. Yeah, there are three of us currently. I hope for more in the future. we're quite pleased with our operations research department with the Naval Postgraduate School. It's a well-kept secret, and it's a remarkable place to work. It's fun to work there. Long hours, hard work, great students, pretty good resources, and no complaints.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the department, the Operations Research Department, and you describe some of the things it does, everything, and uses mathematics, statistics, simulation, probability, decision tools in order to help advise, make decisions. But what makes Naval Postgraduate School Operations Research Department unique? For example, is it the oldest?
It is the oldest operations research department on the planet, and operations research was born during World War II. It was used to plan the Allied bomber campaign in Europe, and it was used for anti-submarine warfare planning in the Atlantic and also in the Pacific. And this was a group of mathematicians and physicists who were drawn together during the war to do planning for our nation's good. And their results were so remarkable, the peculiar genius that they developed of using mathematics to describe situations and take advantage of leverage was recognized after the war and was adopted by more and more of the large corporations in the country. And then in the early 1950s, it actually became its own discipline as opposed to being part of mathematics or part of physics. And we began to develop professional journals, and the Operations Research Department at the Naval Postgraduate School was established, followed soon thereafter by other schools such as Georgia Tech and Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Stanford. I believe now in the United States there are 190 programs in operations research. There are also systems engineering programs, so it's quite ubiquitous. There's a lot of people practicing this craft now.
And given complex problems, are all the faculty have their PhDs in operations research, or are they diverse as well?
No. We have people across the sciences and across operations research is multi-dimensional. Some of us have backgrounds in mathematics, some in electrical engineering, some in engineering acoustics. It's important for us to know what happens when something explodes and what happens when you're listening for something underwater or you're listening for something in the air. And so a little bit of all of that touches us in our classes and our modeling.
Well, we have just a little bit less than a minute left, and I'd like to ask you this personal question. You've lived in Monterey now for some time. What do you like most about the local community?
Well, I'm a diver, as you know, and I'm a pilot, as you know. This is paradise.
For both
the
those
best diving on the
activities.
planet, and it's a great place to fly around in your airplane and enjoy the great outdoors here. I love the climate here and the clientele, and we're very fortunate to live here.
Fantastic. And what about Naval Postgraduate School? What's the most favorite thing you like about working there?
Every morning, I can't wait to get to work. And at night, unfortunately, I take the work home with me. But it's a lot of fun.
Well, Dr. Jerry Brown, Distinguished Professor of Operations Research at the Naval Postgraduate School, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this segment of the YourTown television program featuring faculty at the Naval Postgraduate School.